Hi, I'm Ron Spurnberg, co-founder and CEO of Hi Mama. Welcome to our podcast about all things early childhood education.
In this week's episode, we discuss the value of partnerships between educators and families. Many families are seeking a more active role in their children's care and education and are challenging the notion of teacher as expert. We discuss why childcare and early learning programs should embrace family involvement, which will ultimately benefit not only families, but educators and children as well. We also discuss the hot topic of outdoor play and how it is different than indoor play, delving into how it allows for high-energy, exuberant play that improves both the physical and mental health of our young children. Our guest, Lynn Wilson, is the author of several books in early childhood education, including Partnerships, Families and Communities in Early Childhood, and Outdoor Playscapes, Breaking New Ground. She is a mother of 4 children, an early childhood educator, and a former faculty member at George Brown College. Stay tuned to learn from Lynn's many years of experience in early childhood education. So, Lynn, why don't we start off just learning a little bit more about who you are?
Okay. Most importantly, I'm a mom of 4 children, of whom I'm very proud. But actually, most of my life has been in a teaching capacity of some sort or another. And I guess I always wanted to be a teacher. So I started out as a primary school teacher and started with a grade 3-4 class and just kept working my way down till I got to the kindergarten. Then I had started having my own children, and I ended up at George Brown College with one of my daughters, and they were looking for a kindergarten teacher, and they were developing for the very first time a full-day kindergarten program. So I was hired on there, and I spent the rest of my professional life really at George Brown College, first as a playroom teacher, then as a supervisor, and then finally, for about the last 25 years, a faculty in the early childhood program there.
That's an interesting background because I love speaking with somebody who's both been a teacher or educator in the classroom and then has gone on to provide value or impact into early childhood education in another way. So how do you how do you think that your experience working in a primary school and in kindergarten has influenced your work today?
Well, I think part of it was a real eye-opener in some ways when I went to work in the early childhood environment, because a lot of my formal teaching had not really looked at the development of the early years. I mean, there was some basic coverage of that. But in order to be able to work in the early childhood environment, I actually had to go back to school. Although I had a teaching certificate, I needed to earn my early childhood diploma in order to participate. And so going back to school and learning things that I thought really should have been embedded in my, primary teaching training was really, really helpful. It was really eye-opening. It really helped me understand more about brain development and the importance of early relationships and attachment. So I've really had an incredible opportunity as a teacher to sort of, run the whole gamut between big kids and babies. So it's been a great ride for me.
And you said you also spent some time as faculty. What was the focus that you had, if you had one?
Okay. Well, we did teach a range of different topics, but my area of expertise really was in families and communities in early childhood environments. And really, I suppose, environmental setups, both in the indoor and the outdoor environment, and a big advocate for outdoor play and outdoor environments as well.
So those are actually 2 of the things I really wanted to focus on today. Let's start with the partnerships and communities point. So you're actually the author of a book called Partnerships, Families and Communities in Early Childhood. And I guess the big question for you is, why are partnerships between educators and families important?
Oh, it's such a huge area, but I think what's really important is, and certainly in our teacher training, is that a lot of the students who come to our program begin to think that their work will primarily be with children. And in fact, we can't work with children without working with the families. And so over the course of my teaching years, I really began to understand the power of families as the child's primary caregiver, and really understood the need for that kind of cooperation between both the teacher and the educator and the family. And I think all of this has really evolved over the years as well, because now with full-day kindergarten, our children are in long-term situations from an earlier age. And so now we're also talking about educators both in a classroom setting as well as in early childhood environments, and the meshing in Ontario of that, where you have an early childhood educator and a trained teacher. Early childhood educators are trained as well, but the idea that these two different disciplines are coming together to support children and family, I think are really amazing. And I think that, our focus on working with families is that by working closely with families, we have an opportunity to gain more information about the child and about the family itself. And so where we used to be a more hands-off approach to the work with our families, where I'm the teacher, I'm the expert, just give me your child and I'll do my work, we work much more in collaboration because we know that we can have a much greater long-term impact on children and their development, as well as the support both for teachers and for parents, because we all benefit from this connection and we all learn from each other. And I think there's been such an enormous shift in our country as well in terms of immigration, so that because, take, for example, all of our Syrian families that are now coming here to live a safe life also brings an element of challenge for teachers who may never have worked with a family, who've lived and seen the kinds of atrocities that many of these families have experienced. So we have so much to learn from each other in terms of ways in which we can support each other. And I just think that it's absolutely critical to any kind of early childhood environment to work in collaboration and to engage families in the center and where we're working.
That's actually a really good point about cultural differences and backgrounds. I hadn't even thought about that, but it's so critical, so critical.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of the things you're saying make sense, but is there much research behind the idea that stronger partnerships with families helps children's outcomes or teachers or parents?
Yes. Absolutely. There's a lot of research that's taken place over the years, and I think there's greater and more emphasis in different roles in which families can play. But there's no question that all of the research points to the benefits for children and for families when they're actually engaged and they're actually connecting to the early childhood environments where children are located. And it's one of the most important predictors of children's school success, really, is related to parent self-esteem. And so teachers and educators have an opportunity to support that, to lead with the family's strength, to support. And I really think that one of the ways that we can do this, and it's a model that used to be years ago, would be with a home visit. And before the new family comes to the center, you would visit the home, you get to know the family, meet the dog, get a chance to go to the child's bedroom, exchange information back and forth, but also to encourage families to find a way that they can actually be engaged in a really powerful way, because teachers need to share the power. And we need to engage families so that they feel that they have a significant role to play in the life of the education of their child. And way too often there are barriers to that, ways in which we sort of create situations where families are not really welcome, or we let the parents come in and clean the paint pots as opposed to let's talk about curriculum. What are the things that are important to you? What things in your culture do you want to share with not only, with us, but with all of the children and all of the families? So it's this collaboration that's just so critical, and you can't do it unless families are really engaged and if they feel part of the whole process. And I think, again, that starts at the orientation. Right away, you might, the principal or the supervisor may have the families come in and meet other families that have been involved, look at ways that families have really contributed and the ways teachers and families have really worked in a really significant way with each other to provide a really powerful and stimulating environment for young children.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's almost like you don't want to put on a show to parents that you're going to have them involved. You have to actually be genuine about it. from
That's exactly right.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. There's no, and you know what, one of the benefits really is also to the teacher, because the educator in the playroom, and I'm using both of those terms, sort of because early childhood educators in Ontario are called educators, but primary school teachers are called teachers. So back and forth, because we're all now working together really effectively. And I think that when teachers have an opportunity to work so closely with families, I think when challenges arise during the life of a center, and we know that conflict at some point or another is always inevitable, when people trust each other, when the families feel that the teacher looks for the strengths within that family interaction, and the more experienced teachers are, the more opportunities to have these opportunities to develop really strong interpersonal relationships with families, I think that they begin to feel more proud of the work that they're doing. And it also helps us to plan more successfully for the families. When we know that there may be a new baby coming into the family, we know that, some great programming around that will also support the child's transition as well as the family's transition. So, I mean, the term partner has really been used a lot, but in order to be a true partner, we really need to be engaged with each other. And sometimes it's not possible to have that kind of a connection without breaking down some of the barriers that we see in place, where, again, as I mentioned, the teacher is the expert and families really aren't welcomed here. Or there's lots of ways that we can exclude families by not communicating on a regular basis, that they don't know really what's happening. We need to share the power. I think that's the most important element.
Yeah, and one thing I think that we see quite often is a director of a childcare program wants to show the parents all the good things, but not necessarily the overall and true experience of what's happening in the classrooms every single day. And
right.
Do you have any thoughts about how those directors might be able to feel more comfortable sharing more with parents about what's happening?
I think that's a really good point, because I think most parents are passionately connected to their children, and so they may understand, intellectually what group care is, but they want really the teachers to spend most of the day with their child. And so helping families to really understand the challenges of group care also paves the way for the teachers as well. But I think, the supervisor or the principal needs to have administrative policies in place that really do strengthen the partnership, so that there's goal setting in the, sort of the policies and procedures manual. There's a clear outline of how families can actually be involved in the center. And the supervisor should really be modeling the way and being a really effective communicator, being accessible, being on the floor, being able to answer questions. And her ability to hire outstanding staff to look for the best of the best in terms of the development of the early childhood environment that they're working with. And again, to create a really strong team approach so that everyone feels as if they're on the same page. But we need to look for ways to support families, because just like the teachers are all unique and come from, different backgrounds and have families on their as well, as of their own, we also need to be able to look at the individual uniqueness of each family and look for ways that we really can support them, whether they're experiencing financial difficulty or there may be some great crisis in the family. It may be an extended family member in the house may be really ill. So if we don't have that information, we can't really support the family. So we really need to get inside the family in order to be able to really support the child and the work that we want to do.
It sounds like it almost all comes down to, that thing that's so critical to every relationship, which is open and transparent communications from both parties, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And the good and the bad. I like your point about being transparent about the challenges that you have in childcare program too, right? So, maybe to say to parents, we want to be as open as possible with you, but if you call us at a certain time of the day and we're unable to answer, that's likely because, we're at full capacity working with the children or something like that, just so they know.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that, part of this breaking down the boundaries, and this may not be okay with some teachers, but the idea of saying, today it was really busy. I'm really sorry. I want to give you my home number, and you can call me between the hours of, 7 and 8, anytime you're really feeling like you need to talk to me. Or if you know that there was an issue during the day with a child, and let's say you were on the early shift and you left at 4 o'clock, then being able to call that family member at night and explain what happened. So much happens that's really, creates a negative spin is when we don't communicate effectively with each other. And we need to be on top of the communication. We need to be, sort of accurate and prompt, and so that we can, help to explain the things that might have gone on during the day that may have been challenging, or a child may have lost something that's special, and you may be the only person who'll know where that is. I mean, it's being able to go the distance, because teaching isn't a 9-to-5 job. It really isn't.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to circle back to one thing that you mentioned very briefly there earlier about parents' self-esteem.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit more about what you mean by that?
Well, I think, that today I think it must be incredibly confusing for families, because you can go to the library, and if you look at parenting, you're confronted with a shelf full of experts who have conflicting opinions about raising children, and parenting is really a demanding role, but it also requires ongoing support systems that extend not just to the child care center, but the community in itself. And I think when parents feel that they're supported, that they feel more proud of their work, when we can celebrate the things that they're doing that are working really effectively, I think that really does help them to value the work that they do as parents. And if we're treating parents respectfully, and we're asking for their opinions, and then we're actually using the information they give us, then it really helps to provide those crucial steps to building alliances, to develop this sense of we-ness between us. Because when we become a we, then we can really truly be partners together. And I think when they see that they can do something about their child's education, I think then you empower parents to really believe, I can do something about my housing, or I can do something about my community, or I can do something about the way I'm being treated in my workplace. So I think it's a sense of empowerment, and often the foundation of that is true empathy on the part of the teacher, that we really get connected to these families in a way that we want to be their advocates. I think those things are really important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really like your point about showing the parents that they have a valuable role. They play a very valuable role to empower them. That's so true. It's you hear that a lot about even speaking about the children themselves. That's obviously what we want to achieve is allow the children to know that they're empowered and they're able to, control their own destiny in terms of what they want to learn and what they want to do. But same goes for the parents too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, the children are very quick to pick up if there's some animosity between the teachers and families. They're incredibly intuitive, can really pick up on that. And I think it's just so important that we really observe the interactions between the teachers and the children, and certainly the families and the children, because we learn so much from them. And I think that one of the things we'll often talk about sort of in-house, but I don't think it's out there so much. But when we spent, let's say, a child has been in the center with us for 3 or 4 years, and then along comes the next sibling, and we spend another 3 and 4 years together. When it's time for those families to actually leave to go on to primary school, I think it is a real wrench for teachers. You've built strong relationships. It's also a wrench for the families if this has worked really well. But the best thing is that if we've done a really good job in early childhood environments, we really prepare families to be activists in their new school environment. They already expect to be engaged. They expect their ideas to be respected. They are looking for meaningful ways to help in a new space. And so I think the early childhood, community really has a strong sense of empowering parents to be, advocates for their child through their whole school life.
Yeah, that's interesting. Makes a lot of sense, and we certainly support that here at Hi Mama for sure with what we're doing.
Yes.
And it's there's always challenges, but I think as a whole, at least in Ontario, there's been a lot of progress there.
No, I agree. Lots of strong documents now being released by the ministry. I think there's a lot of really, really good work. And I would say, having come from a college environment training new teachers, that, there's a lot of wonderful research going on. I have been surrounded by enormously successful and colleagues that are really leading the front in terms of research in this area, for sure.
Wonderful. Just switching gears now from partnerships to outdoor play. So you're also the author of a book called Outdoor Playscapes, Breaking New Ground.
Yeah.
And this is an interesting one, and I know it's a kind of a hot topic. And let's just start again with the really broad question. How is outdoor play for children different than indoor play?
Well, it's exuberant play in a way that, often indoor play doesn't allow because of the physical environment. It may well be smaller. It's divided into different centers, where outdoor play is just really full on, high energy. And we know more and more now about how important physical activity is to children. There's an enormous concern about obesity in our country. And even just this week, hearing about if you're sitting in a chair, you're not going to do well in terms of longevity. We need to set the stage with young children and with teachers as well to embrace the outdoor environment in a way that's really meaningful and fun and exciting. I just think it's really, really important. But there are all kinds of physical disadvantages when we don't maximize that outdoor space, for sure.
I see. Because I always feel like it's one of those things that you have a feeling that it's much better, but it's hard to describe why.
I think if you observe children in an indoor environment, and then it's time everyone's going outside, and if you just track one or two children and you look at the way they engage and the way in which they actually use the resources outside. But this also speaks to the idea that the play space in the outdoor environment has to be designed in a way that encourages that kind of adventure playground type play, with lots of loose parts, lots of materials for them to manipulate and to maneuver. I think one of the most pivotal books that I've read in a really long time was Richard Live's book, Last Child in the Woods, Saving Our Children from Nature Deficit Disorder. And nature deficit disorder now has become a call word for all kinds of other organizations that have sprung up really all over the world. There are countries that really lead the way in a great deal of this kind of approach to outdoor play. So forest schools in Scandinavia, we see a growing interest in that here in Canada, and parents are becoming more and more educated about what to look for in an early childhood environment. And they're not just touring the inside of the center. They want to see what's going to happen outside, and is it inventive? Is it exciting? Are there lots of great things for the children to do?
That's interesting. I've never heard that term before, nature deficit disorder. Do you think the impacts of that are primarily of a physical nature, or do you think it's more than that?
No, I think it's a whole body experience. I think that we have a lot of research now about the benefits of green environments and how that improves it. You're in a hospital room and you've got a window and it's a concrete wall outside your window. You're not going to heal as fast as a person who has a beautiful flowering tree outside their window. There are places in Japan where the doctors are now giving prescriptions where their patients have to go to a park and get a park ranger to sign off that they walked for 2 hours, because we understand more and more, both from a spiritual, sort of approach to a physical and a mental approach, being outside is really can be an incredibly invigorating and inspiring environment for both the adults. Teachers also respond really well to these outdoor environments. There's some really remarkable ones that we have in the city that you can go and you can see what's being done. But the play is just really dramatic. And it's the setup of the outdoor environment, and it's the need for loose parts and materials and props.
It seems to me like this is a field where we've only really just scratched the surface of what's possible, really.
Yes. Some good research coming out of University of Western Ontario. Lots of Evergreen Brickworks are doing great programs where they're partnering with schools. And in fact, they partnered with us in the development of our Casaloma Child Care Center about a new redesign of the outdoor play space. Now, the problem is we needed several $100,000 to complete it. So this is not for lack of good ideas and vision. It's always about a lack of money, because major overhauls in outdoor environments are really significant. And it means taking out all of those pieces of equipment that adults thought children would like to use, because so rarely do children get involved in being asked, what do you want to see in that outdoor space? What would be fun for you? Where's your favorite place to be? And it's amazing the insight that children will have, because you know how younger and older children have to be separated on a playground space according to regulations. Well, the older children talk about the little ones being stuck in that box, and why do they have to be over there? Why can't we go over there? Why can't we go and read a story to the babies? So there's a lot of things in the works, and you're right. I think there's a real emphasis now on this, but it clearly is something that we really need to focus on in terms of design, but a community approach to it, so that families, architects, landscape people, educators, all kinds of people are involved in the design of it. And there are a lot of good tools out there now that will help you do that. So I think there's a lot that's going to happen over the next little while, but again, money being one of the greatest deterrents.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And for those childcare programs that might not have the financial means, is there other options for them, do you think?
Sure, absolutely. They could buy my book. Nothing like a plug. I honestly think that in the book there are hundreds of ideas about ways in which you can engage children, and not all of them clearly involve massive expensive projects. But there are many things that we could do. And look, just for one thing, looking at storage. How are we storing our outdoor materials? If a teacher has to lug the materials outside every day, it's unlikely they're going to get lugged out. And so we need to really look at design that facilitates outdoor play, that using what I do call a zone approach, so that you would have a transition zone and there would be pathways to different areas. But you'd have a green zone, an environmental zone, and then a place for really active physical play, for riding those bikes, a social dramatic play, blocks and construction tools, an art area, and then a quiet, sheltered space, a place to go away from everyone. Childcare can be really overwhelming for some children, and they really do need a sheltered space, a place that they can just get away on their own. So I think that there also needs to be on that playground a place for adults. So if parents come and they want to engage with their children, and we would encourage that. Again, there's a place for them to sit. There's a place for grannies or grandpas in wheelchairs, or just a swing to swing on. I think those things are also part of the development of a good green outdoor playscape.
What really strikes me is how complicated it can get when you really start to get into the details of the design, how much evaluation, how methodical you can get about how to design an outdoor playscape.
Right, absolutely. And it also speaks to the connection with the community. How do we involve the community in off-school hours to use this facility? So in some areas, they've combined adult exercise equipment right along in the children's play space. So everybody gets an opportunity to, be involved in something that's really physical and active. So it's just, there are lots and lots of ways, I think, with lots of support, and there are a lot of people in the community now who can provide that kind of support to design and to develop something wonderful.
Well, that's actually a perfect closeout, because that brings us full circle between the community partnerships between the childcare programs and families in the community and our outdoor playscapes.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for coming on, Lynn. I do have one final question for you, which I try to ask everybody if I remember, which is, what excites you most in early childhood education right now?
I think it's the universal global community approach to early childhood that in North America, we're no longer thinking just about our approach to things. There's so many opportunities now to connect with other countries and other ways in which they're approaching early childhood. And so I guess the thing that excites me the most is really that connection. At the college, we were all involved very closely with projects in Jamaica in early childhood, and we learned so much about life in Jamaica, as well as being able to support families back here in Toronto who have Jamaican roots. And so this kind of collaboration, this kind of connection with people across the globe, I think, is really the most exciting thing.
Very cool. If people want to find you online, Lynn, what's the best way for them to do that?
Sure. I could give you my email. It's 56lynnwilson@gmail.com. And I've also written a book on grandparenting, and I have a website, so that might also be a way for people to get in touch with me. So it's www.grandparentshandbook.com.
Very awesome. And I get the sense that all the books that you've authored have a lot of really great practical things that you can take away and use.
Yes, the grandparenting book has over 700 activities, so you won't have any trouble engaging your grandchildren for sure.
Oh, that's a great idea. Okay.
Good. Okay.
Thanks again for coming on, Lynn.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Take care.
Yeah, you too.
What's your name?
Michaela.
Michaela. How are you?
Hi.
You having fun playing?
Yes.
It's a nice day, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes. What's your favorite thing to play out here?
Playing monsters.
You like to play monsters? Do you like the swings? Okay. What else you like to do?
Play my Dora bike.
Oh, with your Dora bike? Oh, okay. Do you ride fast?
Yep.
Yep. Okay. Well, have fun here. All right.